My name is Leoli. Uh, Hi, we're also recording the session if y'all are okay with that. My name is Leolia. I'm one of the co-founders of Rise and Raise, and we have some of our leadership team here, and I'll also hand them off to introduce themselves as well. But we would like this to be as casual and informal as possible. We're really here for you all and to answer any hard or easy questions that you all have. I know sometimes it's really hard to get this information, and we'd also love to get to know you all. So I know that it can be circumstances can be hard, but we definitely encourage you to turn on your cameras as well if you feel comfortable doing so. I'll pass it off to Anais.
Hi everyone, I'm Anais. I just joined the Rise and Raise board this year. I'm really happy to be a part of the team. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I hope that us sharing our journeys gives you some clarity if you have any questions. Again, yes, this is an informal session. This is all for you. So just let us know what you need. And after the fact, we have our contact info listed on the PowerPoint. So you all are welcome to reach out to us. I know the pre-med journey can be really daunting and overwhelming, especially not having people that have been through it. So hopefully today this is a helpful presentation and we can help you all along the journey. And Rise and Raise is here for you, not just with this presentation, but outside. So feel free to reach out. I'm really excited to be here today. And RP, I'll let you finish it off.
Yeah, so thank you. I think Lilia and Anais did an amazing job kind of just introducing just the program as well as just why we're here and what we want to achieve during the session. So welcome. A little bit more about myself and how I'm kind of affiliated with the organization is well, I served as a mentor for Rise and Raise since I believe like first year of medical school. And then it was this year that I became a board member. And I'm currently the mentor coordinator. And so I'm the one that kind of helps coordinate the mentor-mentee pairs. And I try to do that based off of interests and things of that nature. And so if you're interested in kind of finding a mentor, please reach out. We can find someone that is best suited to address your needs. That being said, welcome. Please, just if you have any questions, any comments, or if anything comes up, just let us know. I'd like to think of us as pretty approachable. I hope that's coming across through Zoom because I know with the virtual format, a lot is kind of lost in translation, but just please know that we're here for you. And yeah, we're just gonna try to make this as kind of as like easy as possible. And yeah, welcome.
Alrighty, can everyone see the PowerPoint? Okay, so we're gonna do little intros on each of us. So if you do end up having specific questions, we all have different journeys, and if you need to tailor those or ask us any questions about that, just let us know. So we have some cute little slides with.
Nice, John. Before I get started, could we, if folks are okay with it, we would love for y'all to also just give you a quick intro of yourselves, or even just put it in the chat of just maybe like where you are in your pre-med journey, and that might help contextualize some of the information that we share and tailor it more towards you. And maybe chat would be easier.
Yeah, or if you want, like send it to Sophia and Sophia can kind of tell us like how many first years, like or like freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and what your interests are overall. Basically like a summary, if you feel uncomfortable sharing with the group.
We could do hand raises too, like first years, where are the first years at? And I'm trying to get gallery view. Any freshmen?
I can do a poll if you guys want.
Sure.
Hi, Sarkohi.
Hello, Alice. We have a second year undergrad from UCI. Sir Puhi is applying for MD PhD. It is so exciting to hear all the great things y'all are doing. Rafik Zat.
I guess I can
Awesome.
introduce myself too. Hi everyone, my name is Monvel. I kind of work with Sophia on the APS board. Third year bioengineering major, looking into medicine as a future career, hopefully.
Very cool.
So the poll is up right now. It seems like we have 3 first years, 3 second years, 3 fourth years. We have 1 third year. And I think there are 2 people that haven't voted yet, but we have a pretty split mix. So all around the board.
All right. David is neurosci at UCLA. That was also my major at UCLA. And Gabby, who is doing public health at USC. So awesome. And Monica, psychobio at UCLA.
Oh, like me.
All right, thank you all for sharing. And we're happy to tailor it and like make it as specific to you as possible. And I know sometimes this advice can feel like very broad, but a lot of it does definitely apply. I'll let Anais take the lead.
Thank you. And again, if you have specific questions, send them over to Sophia, or if you feel comfortable, just put them in the group chat. We want to make sure we address your questions if there's anything specific. So a little bit about me. My hometown is La Cañada. I went to La Cañada High School, and then I went to UC Davis after. I really wanted to do the East Coast thing, but I ended up staying. So I loved Davis. It was such a great experience. I wouldn't take it back for anything. I didn't enter college or like know in high school that I wanted to go into medicine necessarily. I knew I wanted to do something that helped people and that was meaningful. I like the sciences, but things in college just kind of like fell into place and introduced medicine to me. So as a first year, I got into a clinic, and it was for the homeless. It's called the Willow Clinic. So it's free healthcare for the homeless, and we would provide different social resources to them as well. And I just loved being a part of it. I got to meet medical students, doctors, and I knew that that's just what I wanted to do. Going in, I was thinking maybe some type of research, psychology, psychiatry, something along those lines. So I did research, and it was like brainwaves, EEG stuff. I hated it. I had an awful time, and I just had to be honest with myself at that point and not force myself down the research path. That's all I knew at that point, that maybe research is just this and it's not for me. But there are multiple types of research. So I kind of delved more into what made me feel most like me, which was volunteering, clinical experience, like talking to patients, creating organizations. So I started volunteering at a children's hospital. It was mainly burn patients and orthopedic patients. So that was a really like formative experience for me. Both of these, the Willow Clinic and Shriners, volunteering there, started my freshman year and kept on throughout until I graduated. So I got to grow a lot. For the clinic, I ended up being the manager and having different leadership positions in the clinic. So I got to build my confidence and just grow throughout those. And I love kids and Disney. So I actually started a club at Davis called Princess Pals. And we dressed up as princesses, and we have a few princes. We had Maui over here. So we had some, and Aladdin, we had Aladdin too. So we went to homeless shelters, hospitals, just wherever would take us. And we grew our organization. It was such an awesome experience for me, and I had such a good time. So those were my main experiences in undergrad. It all kind of led me to knowing that I wanted to go into medicine, to be a leader, and to just make a real difference in other people's lives. So I kept on with these specific extracurriculars throughout. I ended up applying my fourth year. So I went straight through. I was interviewing during my fourth year. And now I'm not currently in Chicago, but I am in Chicago for medical school. COVID's a little weird with everything. So go back and forth between being at home and being in Chicago. I love it. The snow is new, so I'm getting used to it still. Just get a thick coat and a good attitude, and it's okay. I love teaching mentorship. I've been teaching throughout all of medical school, so hope to match into an academic program, maybe an OB-GYN. We'll see how I like the OR. I think that's the big question mark for me now. And my biggest advice is truly, like, don't just do something to check off a box. I think there's all these ideas of what you should do to get into medical school, but I think being honest with yourself and figuring out what makes me, what makes me happy, what makes me fulfilled and gives me purpose, it'll come across as genuine in your applications. It'll make you happier, and it'll just be like a better experience overall. So I think finding a few extracurriculars that mean a lot to you, growing in those and showing that growth is really, really important. So quality over quantity, definitely find those experiences and just run with them. Like there's no ceiling, like the possibilities are endless. You can create an organization, you can create an event, you can do anything that you want to do. And it helps, like, being in organizations for more than 1 year, so you can find that confidence and find that growth. Alrighty.
Hi, everyone. So next is me. So I'm sure I already introduced myself, but again, my name is Urpi. I was born in Moscow, Russia, but I grew up in LA, specifically Glendale. I went to UCLA for college. I majored in psychobiology, and I forget Monica, I believe, was also psychobiology major at UCLA. So yay. And as far as pre-med highlights are concerned, I think just in looking at my application, I had various different activities or leadership positions. I think one of the more prominent ones was the role that I played in the Care Extender program at UCLA. So this is like a really, I mean, you can't really see me. I don't even think I'm in this picture, quite frankly, but this is the UCLA Care Extender program. It has like over 500 volunteers, and I was the department coordinator for the medical intensive care unit. And this is me. So I was given, I'm forgetting the award, the name of the specific award, but it was essentially a scholarship that was granted to volunteers who had committed a certain number of hours and had essentially demonstrated a certain degree of leadership within the program overall. And lastly, just, well, not lastly, but research. My application had a lot of research. Now, just a point about that. So I started doing research my first year of medical school, and I did research all 4 years. I even did research during my gap year, in between college and medical school, but I never actually published in undergrad. So I want to make that be known, because I know that there's this misconception that if you do research, you need to have a publication, which in a sense kind of makes sense. Like, I understand why people say that, because oftentimes you hear that if you're going to do research, you want to show a product or something for all the hard work that you've put into it. But it's hard, right? Given the type of research that you do. So I specifically was involved in basic science research. I worked with animal models, and the project that I was involved in was actually quite extensive. And we worked with various different groups throughout the country. And it wasn't a project that was going to finish in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or even 4 years. And so I never published, but I did present those findings. And that was actually something that I did include in my application. And also the relationship I had with my PI, or the principal investigator, was a great one. And she wrote an amazing letter of recommendation on my behalf. And also, I believe, in just looking at the chat, Leolia kind of mentioned that there's different ways of showing scholarly work. Like, as mentioned, Rafik, like, yes, abstracts and presentations are key to that. And there's many different conferences that you can attend. And I think sometimes it just takes, like, you being proactive and asking your PI, like, hey, can I present this research at this conference? More than likely, they're going to say yes. And there's, of course, also school conferences or like conferences that the school hosts that you can also present. Yes, I believe neuroscience also has like an honors track. I don't know. I don't think psychobiology did. So I never got to do that. But I believe at UCLA, there's like the 199A/B course that I did do. And for that, I was able to actually create like my own publication, so to speak. Now, quality improvement, this was actually something that I was kind of involved in within the Care Extender program. So I saw something that was lacking within with regards to the training of our volunteers, specifically within the medical intensive care unit. And so by working with I believe the head nurse of the department, as well as the program, I don't know what her role is now, but Silva Thomas, I believe she's like the manager or like the director of the program. By working with both of them, I was able to essentially establish additional training days specifically for the volunteers that were going to rotate through MICU. And it was something that we then implemented every 3 months for the incoming volunteers. And that I also included in my application. I also had a series of like clinical experiences, but there was one there was other community-based experience that I had that was particularly valuable to me. And that was a School on Wheels organization where essentially I provided, you essentially provide like free tutoring services to students of under-resourced or underprivileged backgrounds. And so a lot of my time was spent in like domestic violence shelters and things like that, just like tutoring kids. And within that organization, I also assumed a leadership position. So I served as tutor coordinator. So again, just like there's ample opportunities to serve as a quote leader. I think oftentimes it just also requires you seeking that opportunity out. And even if they don't have a role, you can always create that role for yourself as well. So just keep that in mind. And as far as my interests are concerned within medical school, yeah, so for those that don't know, so I'm a 4th year medical student. I applied into anesthesia. I'm specifically interested in cardiac anesthesia plus or minus critical care. In order to pursue cardiac anesthesia and or critical care, I have to do a fellowship in H, but that's after residency, so I won't get into that. But I am interested in academic medicine specifically. So all of the programs that I interviewed at were academic programs. So they were affiliated with an academic institution, or like they had a medical school of their own. They have research opportunities itself. So none of them were like private practice positions. And also mentorship. So I kind of mentioned already that I've served as a mentor for Rise and Raise since my 1st year of medical school. I've also served as a mentor within the Society of Women in Medicine. And even before I started medical school, I was doing other things as an undergraduate student. So mentorship has played a key role, not only in terms of my own professional growth, but also just in making sure that I'm able to give back to my community and to those that may not necessarily have a means of valuable mentorship and mentors. And lastly, I'm interested in medical education and research. Medical education is kind of tied into my mentorship roles. I think in many ways, the things that I've been able to achieve serving as a mentor, I can also see being able to do within the medical education domain. And I'm also currently involved in various different research projects within medical education specifically, and that entails like curriculum development. And I guess my one piece of advice would be there's like no right way of doing things, and essentially different paths can lead to the same destination, and just don't feel pressure to adhere to any given timeline. So the second sentence I feel like is more, I wrote the second point because I remember just being an undergraduate student and having people tell me, you can't do it, or it's not that you can't do it, but maybe you shouldn't, because by the time you graduate, you're going to be too old. Don't you want to get married? Don't you want to have kids? What if you don't get in the first year you apply? Then you have to apply again. So, I mean, there were so many things that people said. And I remember, especially when times got really stressful, I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, what am I doing with my life? Is this really worth it? And it always took, like, I love my mom and I love my brother, and they're extremely progressive and amazing. and they were always the one that kind of cheered me on and just said, no, you can do it. Keep going, keep going. And literally I owe everything I have now to them. So I say that because I know many of you might be experiencing something similar. So I just want you to know that if this is what you're passionate about, keep going at it. It will happen. If you set your mind to it, you will be able to achieve it. And don't think that just because so-and-so finished their entire training within 8 years that you have to as well. People take time off. I took 1 year off in between my college education and my medical education, and that was how much time I needed. But if you need 2 years, 3 years, that's fine too. Many of my friends took more than 1 year off. So that's me.
All right, everyone. So Leolia again. I was born in Yerevan in Armenia, and then we moved to Glendale as well as many other Armenians, which actually was really nice for the transition. I studied neuroscience in undergrad, and I minored, and I took a lot of community health science courses, which I was really grateful for that UCLA had the opportunity for. And then I minored in Spanish, and I took an extra year after the 4 years in undergrad to go to Barcelona to do my Spanish minor requirements. And I come from quite a conservative and traditional Armenian family, so you can imagine there was a lot of hoops to jump through in doing those. But I think those experiences brought a lot of personal and professional growth. I'll just do a quick summary of my trajectory, and I'll go into details a little bit more. After that, I got a master's in global health at UC San Francisco, and then I was applying to medical schools at the time. I am also a fourth year medical student now. Between third and fourth years of medical school, I took an extra research year to do global health research in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, studying HIV. And then I came back now, finishing up medical school, going into emergency medicine. So I will start this off. I think we have such wonderful humans around us, and I'm so grateful for all the mentors that we have. And I am here because of the mentors that I have had and the people that have supported me along this journey. And I think it's really important for us to know that and celebrate the accomplishments folks have had. But I also want to acknowledge that there were a lot of hiccups for me along the way. So I will, and of course, I will share the highlights of my application, but I also want to acknowledge that, like, I was, I am in medical school now, I'm going into residency, but I was not sure if I was going to enter medical school. At UCLA, my undergrad GPA was like a 3.55. My science GPA was a 3.4, I think. I took the MCAT twice, and it's okay. Like, this does not, like, I think there's so much like fear and anxiety built into this, but I think the important thing to recognize is that we come from different backgrounds and of different abilities, and we've had different resources and life circumstances. And I can reassure you that, like, that has not been true of my medical school experience. And I just needed the time and opportunities to grow and like learn how to effectively study and have academic success. And I have done so in medical school. So I just like and I think it can be so discouraging, especially sometimes being in a larger pre-med culture and of hearing of these things and how people are doing. Like, everyone goes through their own challenges, and you will get through it, and you will, like, please feel free to reach out for that support too. And I've also like dropped a couple classes late, so I just want you to know that like my application was not perfect. And then but in terms of my extracurricular activities, the main things that I did a lot of community service, like locally and internationally. I was involved in Teach at UCLA, which was my first exposure to public health. And I got very interested in global health. When I talk about it, I refer to like local as well as international health. I did work in Armenia and Mexico. Sorry, not in Armenia at the time. I wasn't a US citizen. I co-founded a clinic in Mexico, and we provide public health education there and did community outreach and some research there. I did some research in neuroscience there, and I got a couple scholarships through that. I was very involved in mentorship, and also Armenia. And like one of the things is like do the things that make you you. And for me, like one of the things for me was like UCLA Armenian dance group. That was such a wonderful way for me to connect to my Armenian community. And then actually, so I knew I wanted to do medicine going into medical school, but my exposure to public health made me question whether I wanted to do medicine or public health. So I ended up pursuing both. And I thought that like through medicine, it's also a way of advocating for your patients through different avenues connecting to public health. So I have a lot of interest in local and international health equity in the future going forward. Mentorship and pipeline programs have been and continue to be extremely important to me throughout undergraduate and currently in medical school. The Rise and Raise and other programs in medical school, as well as thinking about, and for academic medicine, for me, I'm interested in how we train physicians to care for different patients and their communities, particularly looking at health equity and structural racism. And I think how we teach physicians is how we set them up to care for our patients and communities. My one big piece of advice is to be open and explore and push your boundaries. Don't take no when it's like reasonably no, but don't let people convince you to take their no. As our Pew was saying, there can be some people that are discouraging, but I think a lot of the things that I'm especially reflecting back during residency interview season, like it's like my wildest dreams and more where I am now and the opportunities that I've had. All right, that is a lot of me. That's more than probably that I meant to share. And then the photos are just my family and I at my white coat ceremony, my med school friends and I wearing matching bucket hats because the people you're surrounded by are very important. That's that's us at a protest. And then that's one of my favorite photos that I've taken in Armenia. All right.
All right, perfect, you guys. Thank you guys so much for that introduction and for sharing all of your personal experiences. Now we're entering the Q&A stage of this event. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat, raise your hand, or you can privately message any of us. And while we're waiting for any questions you guys might have, we have some questions that were kind of pre-made that'll hopefully kind of spark up new questions in you guys. So the first question is, when should I apply to medical school?
I can probably start with just speaking from my own experience, and then we can talk about gap years. I didn't know that gap years existed, or else maybe I would have taken one or a few, depending on. But I decided to go straight through. I had a lot of like medical students surrounding me, so I feel like they were kind of telling me when to do things. Like I needed to take the MCAT my third year, so I ended up taking the MCAT January of my third year. It was a little bit hectic. I hadn't taken physics at all before I took the MCAT, so I had to self-teach myself that. I hadn't taken a few of the required courses beforehand. So I started studying very slowly the summer before. So summer after second year, I started kind of looking at the books. I hadn't done physio, things like that, getting a preview. And I ended up taking it in January. In case things went wrong, I could retake it in April because I wanted to make sure by June, you want everything to be done to apply. So I had my letters of recommendation, my personal statement, all those things done by June before I started my senior year. So that's when I applied, and then I was interviewing all of my senior year, basically. I graduated a quarter early, so I had more wiggle room with interviews and things like that, and just more time during my senior year to do that, and also get like a mini gap of like a few months before I started medical school. So I felt pretty like well rested before I started, I would say, as well as fresh enough with the material that I was learning before when I started medical school. So MCAT needs to be taken third year if you're trying to go straight through, and then everything in by June. Earlier, the better. There's amazing applicants that end up just applying late, and that is the only fault to their application. And at that point, the spots are just filled. It's nothing wrong with you or the application or anything, but they just don't have spots to offer. So definitely applying, getting your primary in in the first few weeks, I wasn't like a first day person. It was maybe a week after it opened, up to 2 weeks after it opened. Turn that in. You start getting your secondaries in July, and then interviews can be anytime from, I want to say, September all the way through March of the next year. So I got really fortunate with my interview cycle since I was kind of on time. I got interviews in September. I was done with interviews by September, got my acceptance in October, and then I was, my acceptance is in October, and then I was kind of just smooth sailing from there. So I wouldn't say I had a very common journey, so I wouldn't compare necessarily, but that was what it was for me, going straight through.
Yeah,
guess
thank
if
you.
I,
Oh, no,
yeah, if
Rafi.
I, so one thing I would say is, it was late for me. I was maybe junior year of my UCI when we had a trauma surgeon who allowed like undergrad students go shadowing. That's when I realized I truly am going to pursue medicine. But since I was kind of late to start to the game to get all the classes, I was a chem major, all that stuff. So one thing is always just tell yourself it's okay to not be okay, because I applied one cycle, did not get anywhere, and I feel like I literally just like ate myself up. Like I hurt myself a lot by just going into just this cycling, spiraling down this weird way of just thinking that you're not enough. Why should I do this? I should have became an accountant. I could have already had a house, stuff, all that stuff. And take all the time you need. And the best thing I can say is don't go into this like alone by yourself, because for a lot of us first generation grads, like I had no idea and I did it by myself, and I do not recommend it for anybody to do this. And I had a lot of physician mentors, especially through the Armenian American Medical Society, great doctors, but you won't get the same mentorship like you're going to get to somebody who is kind of head was in your shoes 2 years ago. Because if I would have heard what like Lolia told you guys right now when I was applying, I think pretty sure like that's a life-changing advice she's just giving you guys. So take that advice to the heart. Really, always. I mean, I feel like I'm not. I'm like I can't remember how that medical school application. I'm not really answering the question, but just really get the mentors you need, and people will help you to get your timing right, so you don't waste your time, money, energy, and also miss out on great opportunities in the meantime because you're just concentrated. You put yourself in a tunnel vision. I need to get into med school, but you're just losing years where you could just doing wonderful opportunities that you're losing.
And now you get to receive wonderful mentorship from Rafi. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really scary in the medicine world to be vulnerable and share some of our hiccups. So I really appreciate that. We have a question if anyone's done post-bac courses informally before or had GPA on the lower side after graduating. I personally didn't, and I'm happy to share the information that I know because I did look into it and have had a good number of friends that did do it. My GPA was like on the lower side if you look at schools at like UCLA, and truthfully UCLA changed their admission requirements so that I would not be accepted right now. But what I think was helpful for me was that there was an upward trend in my GPA. And whenever you fill out your application, you put in your courses per year and it calculates a GPA per year. So that's something that programs really look at. I also double applied into MD and DO programs. Happy to speak about that as well, but we have an expert Rafik with us too. But yeah, if I thumbs up, does anyone else know about post-bac programs? If not, I'm happy to comment on them. Yeah, so there are a few ways of approaching the post-bac component of it. So one of them is doing it independently, which I've had friends do and successfully matriculate into medical school. And this might be a financially better option, especially given that so many of the classes have shifted into a virtual platform. You can do courses through UCLA Extension and some of the community college classes to help boost your GPA. Another thing I would recommend in boosting your GPA is do it in a way that you feel you wouldn't be stretched out too thin, but also look at what upper division science courses you can take to help show that you continue to perform well and like have that upward trend. For post-bac programs, I think it's really important to look at what they're offering because there's so many different flavors of them and they're pretty expensive from like 30 to 50,000. So see what content they're offering. A lot of what distinguishes some of the post-bac programs is that they will also offer mentorship and MCAT courses. So especially if you're deciding which programs to apply to. And the really key component to it is like a lot of them, like as a package, can sound so nice, but be critical and like look at what their graduates have gone on to do afterwards. And if like they're actually like putting their money where their mouth is. Is it the other way around? I don't know these American idioms, but they're actually giving you what they're telling you. Yes, Sarah, please go ahead and mute yourself. Or is it Sarah? Sorry, I don't want to.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you so much for all the information and all the great panels. I graduated in 2018 and I went to the community college before transferring to UCLA. And after I went to UCLA, I had like that, negative trend that you talked about because my GPA dropped. And so that's why I've been trying to take like UCLA extension classes, but they're also so expensive. So I mix them with some community college classes. And right now, like I've taken about 24 units of classes, and fortunately, I did well in all of them. And I was just like wondering how much how much of that positive trend would I need to show? Like how many more units do I need to take? Because after some point your GPA won't really change. And like I do have like a GPA, my cumulative GPA is like above 3.5, but it's like lower than 3.7. So um in terms of like GPA, I don't think it's gonna be changing anymore because my units are just getting so much. But in terms of like that positive trend, like how many units would you suggesting?
I would say last resort, because I did it is I would just call up some of your like the top 2 3 schools that you really want to apply to, you want to get into. Advisors are always there. This is just give them a call. Just be very open. Hey, this is my. You don't have to give your name so they'll remember you. And then just my experience is that sometimes I had some problems with my application, and I just the top 3 4 schools I wanted to apply. I called, talk to an advisor, just be like, hey, this is where I am. And I found some good luck with some good advisors who'd be like, hey, you know what? You look okay. Just, just pull the gun and just go ahead and apply. And that's one experience I had.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. So if we're ready to close off on that question, the second question that we have is what opportunities are there to get involved in that will make me a more successful medical school candidate?
I can kind of start in kind of hopefully addressing this question. So in addressing this question, I also hope to address Ani's question. She also posed a really good question in the chat box, basically, with all the limitations from COVID, how do you guys suggest we start getting involved with volunteering or extracurriculars? It's kind of hard finding opportunities since we're doing everything from home. So yes, so before I start, I just want to say that my answer probably is going to be very different because you guys can't do most of the things that we were able to do as a result of the pandemic. One of those things is volunteering. Like I don't think you can volunteer currently at the hospitals. I'm not too familiar with the requirements. Yeah, so you can't. So that's one thing. Shadowing physicians, I think that's physician dependent. You can still reach out to individual physicians and see how comfortable they feel. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of the hospitals are just trying to limit the number of people in the hospitals. And I know that it was initially a challenge for medical students to be in clinical settings as well. So I would imagine that for volunteers, that's still an issue unless you're fully vaccinated, I would think. The second thing is research. Now, we didn't kind of dive deep into this, but there's different types of research. I think most people think of it as you have to do basic science research. You don't. That's what I did initially, but it wasn't until I actually matriculated to medical school that I realized that there are different types of research. So I did basic science, but there's also clinical research. You can also just speak to a professor or an MD or MD PhD and try to write a review on a topic that you find to be interesting. You can also do education-based research. So that's what I'm doing. I'm working on curriculum development. You can also do like research within the humanities. So I know a few of my classmates have been involved with like human rights organizations. So that's something that you can look into. Social justice is also something you can look into. And there are different avenues that you can pursue. I think it's just it's hard finding the people to connect with. And personally, as far as like clinical, I can only speak to basic science, clinical, and education-based research because that's what I've done. For basic science research, I would assume that currently labs are not accepting students, or no one's going into lab, quite frankly. But clinical-based research is actually stuff that you can be involved in, and I think that you just have to be very proactive in finding a clinician who would be willing to work with a medical student. Now, excuse me, an undergraduate student. Now, I want to say that it's quite difficult finding someone that is willing to work with an undergraduate student. I totally understand that. But just kind of going through the roster, like let's say if you're interested in gastroenterology, like that is, or gastric cancer, or whatever the case may be, maybe you could look at the roster of all of the UCLA Ronald Reagan providers and see like who's actually doing research within that field, and then reach out to them specifically to see if they would be willing to work on a project with you. Now, typically with clinical-based projects, they tend to be a little bit more short-term, and there are definitely projects that you can do from home, especially if it's just a lot of chart review. So that's something that you can look into. Reviews are definitely things that you can do from home, that you don't actually have to expose yourself. But again, it's just finding the clinician who would be willing to work with you on that project. And education-based research at your level is kind of, excuse me, it may be a little bit more difficult, but there are a lot of people within the School of Medicine who are looking at who essentially do research within adult learning theory, maybe getting in touch with them. I think a lot of this just has to do with finding the right person, unfortunately. But I just do want to make it so that you guys know that there are different opportunities available, that you don't have to, for instance, just resort to finding a professor or an MD PhD who is doing like PCRs in lab or anything of that nature. There are like different opportunities that exist. And of course, the last one is just community-based projects. And I know that is also difficult with COVID. But I think that, I don't know if if they're doing virtual or Zoom teaching. I think School on Wheels, the organization that I was part of, kind of converted over to that format. But again, it's like, given that you're serving an underprivileged community, oftentimes Zoom and requires technology, of course, and a lot of them don't have access to that type of technology. So various different limitations exist within that domain. But I think you could definitely look into research specifically. And I know a lot of people say, I hate research, I don't want to do it, but look into the type of research that you would be interested in doing. Like basic science isn't for everyone. I don't like basic science research. I did it. But yeah, I think it's a really tough situation, and I'm extremely sorry. I think a lot of us applying into residency kind of ran into the same issue as well. We weren't able to find projects, or a lot of our projects got canceled. A lot of our clinical training had to be modified as a result of that. So I can only imagine that as an undergraduate student, like your opportunities for involvement are very limited. But I also think that most schools are understanding to that. So if anybody else has anything else to add, please do.
I would say just like for me personally, I was applying to internal medicine. I had 3 sub-Is lined up in March, April, May, June, and then like so all 4 of them just got, I could not do them because hospital didn't have PPE, school did not let us go. So a lot of schools are understanding, and then it just comes down to, it's just you just have to ask. Who knows? Like right now, Armenian Relief Society is starting a program. They're helping like Armenian grandmas, grandpas, people above 65 who haven't been able to get the vaccine, calling them, reaching out to them. Small things here and there that will look, if you, because you're genuinely interested, and which comes to my next point, be genuine when it comes to your application, be genuine when it comes to your personal statement. People can tell BS from miles away. So just don't say things because you think that's what the other person is going to try to, especially if it turns out to be virtual interviews and stuff, because most probably there's thousands more who are saying the same thing. So be genuine in your stuff. Hey, if you just want to do some food kitchen, go to your local kitchen and volunteer and cut up some potatoes. That will be your thing. That shows your commitment, that shows your dedication, your motivation to help others. And that's what we're looking for at this, in this profession. That's what somebody, a doctor or somebody who's interviewing, wants to see in a future colleague. So just be genuine and everything else will work out. Trust me, if we survive this, and it's going to be okay.
There is another question here in the chat. It says, any experience volunteering in cath labs? If so, did you find it interesting?
Nara, I just want to clarify, this is specifically cardiac cath. Are you referring to like a left heart catheterization or right heart catheterization for my heart attacks and things like that? Okay. So I've been in the cath lab. I was on the cardiology service last month, so I spent quite a bit of time there. I don't know what you would do as a volunteer in the cath lab, and I say that because I think a lot of what you would do as a student, or even what I did as a medical student, was simply shadowing the attending and the fellow who were actually performing the cases. I do think it's interesting. I'm interested in cardiac anesthesia from the physiology standpoint. So for me, I think it was interesting just seeing the anatomy, and then seeing also the types of interventions that the interventional cardiologist was able to actually do. But, and of course, like, it's all attending dependent. If the attending likes to teach, or if the fellow is receptive to having students there, then of course that becomes an even better experience overall. But yeah, so it was interesting in that sense. Did that answer your question? I feel like I gave a very broad answer, but I don't know if you had anything else in mind. Okay, perfect. It is cool. Cardiology is interesting. The heart is, from a physiologic standpoint, is really interesting. A lot of physics, if you're into that. Yes.
All right. So one of the things that I did not know until like very close to applying to medical school is the disadvantaged application status on the application process. Can folks put a thumbs up or thumbs down on their Zoom screens if they have? Thumbs up if you've heard of it, thumbs down if you haven't heard of it. Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Have folks heard of the disadvantaged applicant status on the AMC application? I'll just briefly share. Okay, some folks have. So I did not know this was a resource that was available. And I wish I knew it earlier, because you can check your family financial aid eligibility for it, but you get financial assistance, we get a fee waiver, some kind of fee waiver for the MCAT. You also get their AMC like guidebook to the MCAT, and you get access to the medical student admissions registration thing, the MSAR website, that would otherwise be like $40, I think it was, for the year at the time. And then you also get reduced fees for your medical school application cycle. So you basically don't have to pay secondaries, and you'll get free 15, you get 15 of your applications are free. And I just want you all to be aware of this resource and take advantage of it in case you're available. And it also gives you an opportunity on your application to talk about, if you feel like you are might qualify as disadvantaged, explain why, to help contextualize that for the medical schools.
Also, just to kind of add to that point, even if you're not sure, it never hurts to just write what you think is important or necessary for them to know within that box. I think, like, if anything, they'll ignore it, but I don't necessarily think it's going to work against you unless, well, hopefully you're not writing something that would. But if you think that you are disadvantaged, or that I think typically they also list a series of things underneath that question. So like I believe if you're like, so Leolia, you kind of touched upon the socioeconomic background, but if there were other things that were listed, like if you've received like a Pell Grant, I believe, which is a federal loan, that also would qualify you for, I believe, some assistance, or that would also potentially mean that you're like disadvantaged. Just again, like if you're not sure, you can kind of write it in the box. You can also reach out to the admissions advisors and kind of get their take on it as well.
And also, since we're talking about some financial assistance, I know when I was taking the MCAT and I took one of the courses, and it was very expensive. But I already graduated from UCI, but I basically became a member of the pre-health society, because you can, as an alumni, just paid for like 1/4's dues and got the discount code for like $500 off the Kaplan course, something like that. So these are things that even though you might have graduated, you're like, oh, you know what, I'm going to take the year off and then take the MCAT. Those are just one thing that's available to help you out if you're taking an MCAT course.
Great. Are we ready to move on to the next question? Good. Okay. So you guys kind of already touched on this, but maybe you guys can elaborate. Do I have to do research? How do I get involved? Find the PI willing to work with me?
I think I don't want to be. I kind of touched upon research, so I won't talk more about it, but I will tell you how I found my PI, because I know that was a question that I had as an undergraduate student. Like, how do I find someone willing to work with me? And I remember at UCLA, I believe it was called the student, it was like SRP, right? That's what it was called. And there was like this web page where they listed like a series of PIs who were willing to work with students. And then if you were interested in the project that they were working on, then you can reach out to them or like apply for that position. Then you would have to interview. And then it was like questionable as to whether or not you would actually get the position. And I remember one time I applied to a position, I think over like 200 undergraduate students had applied for the same position. I did not get it. I actually just like started cold emailing PIs. I was like, okay, like I'm interested in the project that you're working on. I'm going to email you. Like, and then typically it all comes down to how you present yourself. So I think a good email can take you a long way. So basically within my email, I always like thank them for their time. And I always reference like their most recent research paper or project. And I was like, I'm extremely interested in what you're studying. I would love to meet to discuss this further and how I can personally be involved. Also, I've attached my CV, and I always included my student transcript as well. That's all I had. I just had a resume and that. So it's like, I'm going to provide whatever they need or feel that they need in order to determine whether or not they want to work with me. And sometimes people just ignore you, honestly, and that's okay. And I think it was literally the 20th PI that actually emailed me and was like, hey, we can meet, which was great. And I worked with her and it turned out to be fine. Another thing that one of my friends had recommended is that all the major labs at UCLA, and I presume at UCI and a lot of the other schools, I think they were required to essentially post something on YouTube about their research. And I actually emailed PIs through that as well. I was like, oh, hey, I watched your YouTube video. So there's like various different things you can do. But yeah, it's gonna take a lot of effort on your end. So don't be discouraged if they ignore you, or if you even get an interview and they end up just not taking you. It's happened to all of us.
That's really great advice, RP. And another suggestion is if you are connected to any juniors or seniors who have been working in the lab, a lot of folks begin to think about like the RIF placements and like need additional help. So those might be ways for you to be connected, but I understand that's also a little bit limiting, especially with COVID. But yeah, a lot of the cold emailing and the no responses are discouraging until someone replies. And I just want to like validate that is a very common experience. It's not you. And if you do have a mentor, like feel free to like ask them for advice on the CV and like helping you draft a cover letter. Because once you have like that written out really strongly, you can really adapt it and reach out to a variety of folks.
Sir Kui, go ahead.
So I had a question about so spring quarter ends in June, and let's say like if someone's applying this cycle, like they would submit the application by like second week of June. Are the courses that you're taking in like spring quarters, do they still count towards like do they go on your application, or like do you update them with your grade, or let's say if like a class, or if like medical school has a like a psych requirement, if you're taking that class like in between actually like getting in and after graduating, like how do they look at that?
So from my understanding, my spring quarter grades did not apply to the GPA that I applied with. The grades that I earned in my spring quarter also didn't necessarily affect my GPA to a significant degree. So I didn't really update them unless they asked for it, but nobody did. I think it depends. Like, and if the grades that you earn are really make a significant impact on your science GPA or your overall GPA, then that would be nice to kind of include it. Or if, for instance, you didn't perform well on like the first part of biochemistry, but then the second part you do considerably better, and you kind of want to show that, I can see that as well. But for the most part, I was told to not do anything about it unless like they specifically asked. I think their primary concern was that like they just want to make sure that you've taken all the prereqs necessary for the program, and you can even be taking classes all the way up until you matriculate. They just want to make sure that if, for instance, you say that you're going to be taking Spanish and X, Y, and Z before you start, well, they're going to be checking your application, or not, excuse me, not your application, but before you actually start medical school, they're going to be like, oh, did you actually take Spanish and X, Y, and Z? Yes or no. But at that point, you're kind of accepted. So the grade that you earn isn't as important, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll manually input like the classes that you're going to have or that you are currently in. And if you're going to do one in the summer as well, so they'll show up, but the grade won't be there. And like RP was saying, it won't be in the GPA. I use that as an advantage just to kind of like update them just so they get to see my name again. Because you want like during the application cycle, if you don't hear back, trying to send updates, there aren't really updates for a lot of people. So classes you could send and just say, oh, I got an A in this class, or this is another class I took, just to kind of get your name there again. So I thought it was actually nice to send them. Another like little personal touch, sometimes I would send like, I don't know how great of advice this is, but it worked for me. I would send like certain photos. If like I had my first Princess Pal visit, that was before I even that's after I applied. So I didn't have any of that. So I sent like, this was our first visit, and I would send little like updates that not frequently, but I would put, okay, these are the classes I took. This is my grade. And I had my first princess visit. Here's a picture from it. Something like that, just so they can see you again.
Also, you guys, before we kind of end the session, because it seems like we're getting close to ending, I kind of wanted to also talk about letter of recommendations. I did get a really good question about just LORs and how kind of like when to ask for it, how to ask for it, and who to ask for it. So I can kind of start, and of course, like I would love for Rafiq, Anais, and Leolia to kind of jump in, but essentially for who to ask, I think certain medical schools have requirements. So if you're planning on applying to a large number of medical schools, there are certain subjects or like certain disciplines that need to be represented in your LORs. So I think, for instance, most schools require like one life science professor or one physical science professor, or a research PI or an MD. And that's just like 4 that I can think of. I remember one school wanted like a humanities professor, and I was like, I don't even know where I'm going to find this. And my recommendation would be that regardless of the class you're taking, like doesn't matter, even if you think it's like non-science, they won't care. If you performed well and you have a great relationship with that professor, ask for a letter of recommendation. And I think it's also important to note that the LOR has to be written within that year that you're applying. So let's say you met this professor in your first year of undergrad, and you're like, wow, this professor was amazing, we had such a great relationship, but I'm applying to medical school in year 3 or year 4, whatever. Like they can't potentially, I remember thinking like, oh, they wouldn't be able to write my letter of rec now. Well, they can just ask for a letter of recommendation, and then let them know when you're actually going to apply. And then every so often, just like check in with them, be like, hi, just wanted to check in. I'm doing this, this, and this now. Appreciated your advice on this, just so they remember you. I think it's like a nice touch, so that once it gets time to actually like submitting that letter of recommendation, like they remember you. You're not just like some random person that was in their class that, yes, at the time you had a great relationship with, but that they forgot. And so yeah, that would be my recommendation, just asking a letter of rec from like anyone that you have a really good relationship with. And then also, of course, just being mindful of like the set requirements that you have, that certain schools want like a life science professor, a physical science professor. And I think Anais, you had some really great points about that as well. And I was wondering if you could also kind of like jump in.
Great, thank you. That was really helpful. I had a little bit of a unique experience with my letters. I actually never really asked for a letter, but I ended up getting letters I just wanted to form relationships with my professors, and I kind of sought them out there are certain teachers that they just don't want to be there, and I didn't necessarily try with those. They're more into research. They didn't want to do the academic part, but there were people that they really love teaching. You could tell they love their students, and I definitely targeted them as people that I wanted to form relationships with in the long run. So definitely I would go to office hours, not every single time, but I would try to go frequently. And now I don't know if, and I know in the chat we're talking a little bit about that. I don't know if there are virtual office hours, but even reaching out and asking for one-on-one time, or I want to go over questions, let them know you before the class ends. Try to perform as well as you can. You don't have to get an A, but try your best to do as well as possible and improve throughout the exams. So at the end of the course, and this can be an email format, I actually just ended up writing like a handwritten letter for the certain professors that I felt like I gravitated towards and we had a relationship. I'd like wrote them a letter, thank them for the class, and that I really appreciated everything, and just that I wanted to continue a relationship with them. If they had time, we can grab coffee next quarter, whatever it was. And I usually got an email back. We would meet up for coffee, and I would tell them about myself. This is what I'm doing outside of school. This is what's important to me. I'm planning to apply to medical school. And they all just said, oh, do you want me to write you a letter? And that's kind of how it went. It's not going to be like that every single time, but I think, meeting up with them for coffee and just letting them get to know who you are, they'll advocate for you, and that letter will be so strong because it's not just your performance in that class, they can speak to more. I had a professor, I like sent them all of my white coat photos because I felt like close to them. So I sent it to them. My other teacher lost like 40 pounds. She literally sent me like a mirror selfie with like going like this. So it was cute, you know, like we kept up with each other. Find those people that like they have a heart, they want to help you, and they're going to put so much more effort into that letter than just someone who they were your professor and they're writing a bunch of other ones. So I know it's tough with especially a lot of people in a class, but for me, like writing a letter made me stand out, and I wasn't trying to stand out in any way, but that just felt right for me to do, that I wrote and I just gave it to them after the final. You can do that in an email format, whatever it is, but try to meet up with them for coffee, try to get to know them, ask them questions. Then you'll form that relationship and they can like inspire you and do more than just a letter for you, I would say. And I hope that helps. It was a lot.
Yeah, and definitely the two letters direct I got from my science professor is uh, both of them, because I had gone to their office hours. I know that's why I ask, even if it's a small group, even better. They'll know you, especially now with Zoom, they actually see your name, so they'll remember your name. And both of them were from my sophomore year, but both the professors, I picked them specifically because they actually wrote their letters, as in they interviewed you, they asked for your CV, they asked for your personal statement. You also kind of want to be picky because some classes you got an A, but if you get a bad vibe from the professor, know that they're not gonna write a good letter. It's gonna be some half-ass, half paragraph thing. That'll hurt you more just because they're gonna write, this person was in my class, I saw him in office hours, they got an A. I hope he's gonna, that is not going to help you. So a strong letter. That's why the two professors I had, absolutely, they interviewed everybody they wrote letters for, and one of them was like, you know what? I only write 12 letters a year. So after I graduated, I would still go back to their office hours. You have to put in, if you want a good letter, you have to put in the time, because you also have to respect their time that they're actually going to take, and a good letter takes some time. So always have an updated resume, photo, just so they can remember you, who knows, and personal statement, even though it's just because they also want to write something that's tailored towards you. If you're saying that, hey, I'm interested in public health education, then also a good letter writer will write a letter that's good for you.
I want to second what Rafiq said. So, and I also want to share a personal experience with a letter writer. So, I remember, I forget the medical school, but they were requesting a letter of recommendation from someone in like an upper division course for my major. And I like looked, and I was a psychobiology major, and unfortunately, I didn't go to as many office hours as I should have. I'm being completely honest. And so I based it off of which classes that I do exceptionally well in. And I remember this specific class, I had earned an A+, and I was like, okay, perfect. He should be willing to write a letter of recommendation for me. And I remember going into his office hours and I told him, I kind of like, again, gave him my general spiel. And then at the very end, he asked me like, oh, what's the time frame? When do you need this letter by? And I said, within like in 4 weeks. And he was appalled that it was 4 weeks and not longer. He's like, typically people tell me to give me at least like 6 to 8 weeks to write the letter. I was like, oh, my apologies if you need that much, if you need 6 to 8 weeks, like, of course you can have it. But after that interaction, I just had a really bad vibe. I just knew that this man is not going to write me a good letter. And I started looking for other professors automatically who would be more than willing to write a letter for me. And I remember he submitted my letter 2 days after we had that conversation. And I'm like, yeah, he definitely did not write a good letter for me. And I did not use his letter for any program. And I'm saying this, so A, give your letter writers plenty of time to write their letter. So 6 to 8 weeks at least. B, if you get a bad vibe, go with it. It's probably right. If they submit your letter within a week of you asking for it, that's also a bad vibe, and do not send that letter to any program.
That is great advice. Thank you guys so much. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time and maybe wrap up. You guys did amazing. Me in my third year, having heard a lot from you guys already, learned a lot more new things today. So thank you guys so much. And yeah, if you guys want to if anyone wants to hang around and ask any last minute questions, you're welcome to, but we're kind of concluding now. So thank you guys for joining.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. As we wrap up, just a quick plug. We do have our, maybe we can share it in the link, our Rise and Raise mentorship app. It's rolling admissions. I mean, I shouldn't say admissions, it's rolling. Feel free to submit it anytime. We're happy to connect you with folks. We have also put up our contact information. Please have a low threshold for reaching out to us. We are more than happy to connect and answer any questions that you may have. And I see that we have a hand up.
Hi, yeah. So my name is Milani. My case is really unique. So I was wondering if you guys have seen any of this while you're in medical school. So me and my husband migrated to US like 6 years ago. We were boyfriend, girlfriend back then, but we got married. We were both 30 years old. And then we're planning to apply to medical school next year. I'm a UCLA undergrad, but my husband is doing his master's in microbiology, just because they wouldn't accept his foreign GPA and all the coursework that he'd done. So I know that a lot of people are applying to medical schools, like 50 medical schools, and they just get into one. And we're like, where we're gonna get in? Let's say if I get into Chicago and he gets in here, like in California, is there any way that we can join back together? Or let's say if I'm in Chicago, I can just come back and continue my school and like kind of transferring from one medical school to the other. Like we're thinking maybe we can just go to medical school for 1 year, wherever we get in, and then just send a request, see if one of us can transfer to the school that the other one is going. So
Yeah, first of all, I admire that you all are making the transition and still pursuing what you're interested in and passionate about. That's really hard in a new setting. I unfortunately do not know of anyone personally, but never say never, as Justin Bieber taught us. But what I would recommend is, so what I have heard of is there was a medical student at a different university whose partner got married and started residency at Yale, and they were able to like connect through the medical school and residency program, were able to help them transfer. Another option is whichever school that you get into, you can also, I imagine that you're probably going to be applying to the same schools, reach out to the admission committees, letting them know.
And it's also just, you have to say that, hey, us applying there, if we're together, we will do better together. We're going to help each other. But as a last resort, let's say, I hope not, but I hope you guys go to the same place. It's always, okay, maybe the first 2 years, you guys just have to be separate. And then a lot of places, you'd be like, hey, you know what? My husband's in LA. Can I do my third year rotations in LA? I know some places, they kind of can work with you, find your core sites, a lot of who are like closer to home. But one case that I've seen, it's Western U, because Western U has a sister campus. So somebody from the other campus came to our campus, but that was basically within the school because we have two campuses. But other than that, you guys should apply. And I feel like if admission committees will be considerate because you guys are married, and so hopefully it all works for you guys, truly.
thank you so much for all the advice.
I mean, I guess before you guys go, can I just ask, like, I know some of you mentioned, like, you guys want to go into academic medicine. I was wondering if, like, any of you could, like, speak to more about, like, what that is and, like, what's the differences between, like, I don't know, like primary care, like the regular doctor you think of versus like academic medicine?
Yeah, I can kind of start, and then I would love to hear what other people think. But for so private practice is a little different in that typically, depending on your specialty, you work in a clinic. You're kind of your own unique little entity. You get your own referrals. You have your own patient panel. But it's not necessarily affiliated with like an academic institution. When I say that, I mean like a medical school, as you would think of it, like UCSF is an academic institution. They have residents, fellows, they have other trainees there. It's not just the attendings. Whereas in private practice, it's just the attending. So for that reason, I personally kind of steer towards academic programs because I want to work with trainees. I want to work with medical students. When I'm a resident, I want to work with interns. When I'm a fellow, I want to work with residents. And when I'm an attending, I want to work with all of them. And also with academic programs, there are also opportunities to be involved in research. So I like research. I probably will continue to do research in my career, but not basic science research, as I kind of mentioned. There's clinical research. There's also like curriculum development. And that's kind of more so what I'm interested in. And I want to be more involved with the School of Medicine, kind of help shape the curricula or medical school curricula, I should say. So that's kind of why I'm pursuing an academic medicine position for research and for added mentorship, and to also continue serving as a mentor and as an educator. And also just the collaborative nature of being in an academic setting is a little different. So you're working with other specialists. Typically there are conferences that are held or like morbidity and mortality conferences, like M&Ms, that are weekly conferences where you get to review cases. So there's a lot of learning. There are always like visiting professors, which is kind of interesting. It's like intellectually challenging as well. So those are like various reasons why I find that to be fascinating. And private practice is a little bit, for me, a little bit more isolating. Of course, you also have to take into consideration compensation. So I think oftentimes private practice they tend to be more or better compensated financially, if that's an interest. Sure, but I like being in the hospital setting. I like being in an academic setting. So, but I would like Leolia, Anais, and I believe Rafik, who is no longer on the line, to join in.
Thank you, Arfi. That was a wonderful summary. The things I'd add, there's also practices like Kaiser, which is what considered community. And then when we talk academics, I think traditionally folks like associated with the university. But there are, I guess, two flavors of it. Like we have really incredible county hospitals and systems and really amazing academic programs associated with it. And the county serves folks who are underinsured or uninsured. So those are, and some of the examples are like Harbor, Olive View, and then other things. There's also opportunities to do things like IHS, Indian Health Services. And some people do mixed.
Yeah, no, that was very interesting. I guess like when I think of doctor, because like I'm not necessarily like applying this cycle. I'm probably, if I'm gonna go med school, my path would be like a couple years down the road, because I don't think I'm necessarily ready for it now. But like it's interesting to like go to these panels and like meet you guys and like learn everybody's different stories, because it gives me like a different perspective on like the whole situation, right? Because like not everybody's cookie cutter type of thing. So like thank you, and like it was nice meeting all of you and like hearing all your stories. So, and good luck to all of you too.
I just want to say you can be an MD and not do any clinical work. There's like so much policy work and advocacy work that you can do. Like there's a lot of curricular work, for example, like Sketchy. I guess y'all wouldn't know Sketchy. There's a lot of like medical education, like consulting that happens. And truthfully, those are things I'm not exposed to either. But like in medical school, we are exposed mostly to people that do academia and private practice.
Right. Because I guess for me, I'm kind of I'm an bioengineering undergrad, so like my exposure right now is kind of the science behind like what the medical people use, like learning about like the different machines and stuff like that. So it's like my exposure now is going into that, but I'm also like the people's person type of side of it too. So I don't know. I'm kind of deciding future career options, and medicine, it's like the more people you meet, there's like you realize there's like more things to do than just like the cookie cutter, like, oh, I'm a doctor, like I treat like old people on like a daily basis or type of thing, kind of, like the typical like Armenian family medicine doctor that you hear of, yeah.
And Manvel, I want to also mention this. In my class, there are a lot of people who had pursued engineering in the past. And I think being in the Bay Area, tech is huge. My school isn't necessarily, we're not too connected with that world, but I know that Stanford, for instance, is. And I think if you're in the right location, I know there's like little tech bubbles throughout the country. You can also be involved in that. There are so many opportunities within that field. I'm not familiar with it, but
Right.
all it takes is just like that one email to get you connected. And if they know that you're a medical student who's like interested in tech and innovation, then I'm pretty sure they would be willing to work with you on a project. So.
Yeah.
And also radiology is very tech heavy. I don't want to, I'm not like encouraging you to go into radiology, but there are certain fields where it kind of benefits you when you have an engineering background. I know even like within anesthesia itself, there are like so many different opportunities to get more involved in cardiology. I mean, there's like numerous opportunities. Like you don't have to be, as you mentioned, like a family care physician if that's not what you want to be.
Right. Good points. Thank you all. Because I'm about to leave, but like I wish you all good luck in the future, and thank you. It was a really nice conversation.
Sarah, do you still have a question?
Hi. No, I actually just I'm not sure if Loyola is still on the chat.
Yeah, she is.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna connect with her later, but I was just gonna ask to see if she's planning to use her Master of Science in Global Medicine later as a physician, and like what kind of opportunities do you see to have that, the global aspect combined with your practice as a physician?
That's a great question, and one that I ask myself frequently. My motivations for doing the master's prior to medical school, I think for me, I like wanted to take a step back and look at the macro and understanding and how we understand and contextualize health, and then how we study it in different dimensions and how we ask those questions. And I think the reason like I did medicine is for the global health component of it. So I think for me it was really important to have the research and like foundational tools going into it. Since being in medical school, the ways that I have done that, again, emphasizing global is local and international, for me has been going back home to Armenia to do some diabetes work there, working with some of the rural community practice clinics. And then in my master's, I focused more on qualitative research, and then more I wanted to get stronger quantitative skills, which is why I pursued the epidemiology training between my third and fourth year of medical school, which was an NIH funded grant fellowship. Other things and ways that I'm interested in pursuing it. So there's like still a lot of opportunities with the medical school. There was like the CDC epidemiology elective program that I was going to do, but the pandemic happened. And then going forward, I think, I have continued to be involved with a lot of our like medical school efforts with our curricular design and like how we teach global public health, and then still involved with like health justice things within our school locally with like outreach programs. Going forward, I think like things that I'm thinking about is like there's a CDC epidemiology intelligence surface. There's a lot of like different global health fellowships, and I think like I just don't see myself just doing clinical medicine and finding different ways to incorporate that, whether that's like through program development or research. I don't know that I've like fully found my niche, but I think like having the research tools under me, like those are things that I can apply into whichever component of global health that I decide to focus on. Of course. And I got your text, so we'll definitely connect. Sarah also got accepted into the master's program, so we'll be touching base. Thank you all so much.
Okay. Well, I think I need to sign off, but I don't. It was very nice meeting everybody. And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, RP. Thank you, Leolia. Thank you guys all for all of this. So we'll touch bases later. Thank you guys.